Gospel according to Luke. Jesus said to the people in the synagogue at Nazareth, "Amen, amen, I say to you, no prophet is accepted in his own native place. Indeed, I tell you, there were many widows in Israel in the days of Elijah, when the sky was closed for 3.5 years, and a severe famine spread over the entire land. It was to none of these that Elijah was sent, but only to a widow in Zarephath in the land of Sidon. Again, there were many lepers in Israel during the time of Elisha the prophet, yet not one of them was cleansed, but only Naaman the Syrian." And when the people in the synagogue heard this, they were all filled with fury. They rose up, drove him out of the town, and led him to the brow of the hill on which their town had been built, to hurl him down headlong. But he passed through the midst of them and went away. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
So as I said just before Mass began this morning, we're starting a new offertory song for this week of Lent. And so every week I've been changing the songs we're singing in the offertory. And so there is a handout in the back of the church. It's called Adoramus Te Christe. It's the remember, every time we have the Stations of the Cross, right? We say, "We adore you, O Christ, and we bless you, because by your holy cross you redeem the world." Right? That's the song we're singing today during the offertory. It's just those words in Latin. Right? The printouts aren't the best quality. It's the best I could come up with at 6:30 in the morning on a Monday, right? And I've also, I'm familiar with this song. It's very well known, but I've actually never sung it in church before, so we'll be doing that together today. So we'll see how it goes. In the readings today, there's really profound readings. The first one is about Naaman the Syrian, right? And it's one of the great stories in the Old Testament about humility. Naaman was this great Syrian general. Syria was enemies with Israel, and he was very well accomplished, but unfortunately for him, he was suffering from a version of leprosy. And so one of his slaves that he had captured in one of the battles with Israel, she said that he should go to Elisha the prophet in Israel. And of course you can imagine that would be the last thing, right, that he wanted to do. Right? And then when he goes and sees Elisha, he tells him to go and wash himself in the Jordan River. And he was thinking, why did I have to come all the way to Israel just to wash in this river? Right? And if you've ever been to the Holy Land, you know, right, the Jordan River really is not much to look at. Right? Some of us, we might have this idea of the Jordan River being like the Mississippi or something like that, like this really big river, but it's actually not. Right? It's about 10 yards wide. Right? It looks like a little stream almost. Right? And yet, when he did this, he was cured of his leprosy. And so it's an example of a man who was humbled and then was healed of his illness. And of course the church fathers saw this as a foreshadowing of the sacrament of baptism, which is why we hear it every year during the season of Lent. Our gospel speaks about humility as well, and that the people at the synagogue in Nazareth, Jesus was preaching to them, and he noticed that they were becoming hardened and stubborn in their ways. And they weren't as open to his message. And so some of them started to murmur against him, and he brought up some of these stories from the Old Testament about how in the days of Elijah and Elisha, that there were many living in Israel who needed to be cleansed or healed of various illnesses. But instead Elijah and Elisha were sent to the Gentiles. The Gentiles were more open to what they had to say. Right? So that's some of the background those readings. We also hear this morning from Psalm 42. Psalm 42. You guys are very fortunate this morning. Very lucky today. You guys are going to be let in on a little secret about Psalm 42. I hope it's something that sticks with you. Psalm 42 is one of the most significant psalms that we hear from throughout the church year. As a matter of fact, every year at the Easter Vigil, there are 7 different options for the responsorial psalm. You've been to the Easter Vigil before, you know there's an interchange. There's a reading followed by a psalm, followed by a prayer, right? And this goes over and over during the Easter Vigil, and there's between 5 and 7 readings, right? But one of the required psalms every year is Psalm 42. It's required every year at the Easter Vigil. And you guys are going to get to find out why this morning. Some of us, when we took the pilgrimage in January to the Holy Land, I made note that in a lot of those ancient basilicas and cathedrals, there were depictions of Psalm 42. And the depiction basically was you would see a stream coming down from the cross or from an image of the church, and at the side of the stream you would see a deer licking up water from the stream. It's a very common image in all the cathedrals and basilicas. And if you ever get a chance to go to Rome, right, you might have that question. And it comes back to Psalm 42. Psalm 42 says, "As the deer longs for running streams, so does my soul long for you, O God." Psalm 42. And the reason why this image became so popular in the early church actually goes to a very little known fact about ancient biology. In the ancient world, there was a belief that deer actually would eat serpents. They would eat snakes. Now, that may have been a mistaken belief, but it was a common belief in the ancient world, in the Roman Empire. And so, of course, a deer who would eat a serpent was an image of the early Christians who were triumphing over the devil, turning away from sin. And of course, after a deer would, eat a serpent, it would be thirsty, and it would long for the running waters of baptism. In the early church, when Christians went through OCIA, when they went through the initiation process, there would come a point in the liturgy where literally the early Christians, they would be told to face away from the sanctuary, which was symbolizing that they were facing the world of sin, right? And they were told to turn their backs on their sins and on the devil and turn towards the Lord. And it was shortly after that they would triumph over the devil, and then they would be baptized. They would long for the running streams of baptism, right? And that's why Psalm 42 is such a significant psalm, and why we hear it every year during the time of Easter, and also multiple times throughout the church year, right? It's now you guys this morning are some of the few who know why.